Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra. As always with James from Gunner Blog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
From London.
Yes, we're both in London at the same time.
Incredible.
Yeah.
They said it couldn't happen.
And here we are. Oh.
Where to begin, Andrew?
Where to begin?
So you came over for the game.
I came over for the game, for sure. Came over on Friday and...
That shouldn't be allowed to happen anymore, I think, after what happened yesterday.
You're blaming me?
I think so.
Not the missed chances?
Not the missed chances, not the injury crisis, not VAR.
Not the inaction in the transfer market, it's all me.
No, it turned out it was all down to you. No, I don't know. I mean, I felt for you, actually, because I thought you were on course for a resounding victory.
It did look like that. I mean, we had got ourselves into a very good position, and I think when we get into the nuts and bolts of it, you know, we can talk about some of the goals we conceded, what went wrong, what we don't have, what we didn't have on the bench. But ultimately, when you get yourself 2-0 up at home against a team like Aston Villa, who are a good team, you put yourself in a fantastic position to take all 3 points. Ultimately, we let that slip, you know, which can happen. That's football as well for you, isn't it? You know, you can be going well and then shit turns around. It's a topsy-turvy game at the best of times.
I guess, but I think it's the first time that's happened under Mikel Arteta. 2-goal lead at home, pegged back.
Right.
And I think he will have been pretty furious about it.
He looked quite angry towards the end. I think as the game was reaching its conclusion, you could see that he was getting more and more wound up and frustrated, and obviously, you know, desperate to win the game. And as I was going out of the ground and just sort of leaving my seat, I had a final look down. I was like, I wondered about the press conference. I wondered, was any of that anger going to be part of, you know, how it went? It didn't seem like that was the case, but yeah, you can imagine he was not happy. Yeah,
and who knows what was said in the dressing room, but he seems to be in a place where the messaging around his players and what they're doing is really positive, isn't it? He seems to be saying, look, I can't ask much more of these guys in the circumstances.
I don't think he's wrong there either.
No, I don't either. Like, I don't feel... I don't know about you, but I don't feel particularly angry about the way the game went. I just sort of feel a slight sense of resignation.
Yeah,
maybe.
that was what struck me on the way out. It was an air of obviously disappointment that we didn't win, having been in that position, but a sort of resignation that, you know, after what has been a really difficult week, you know, grueling week, let's say that, because it was 120 minutes, wasn't it, in the FA Cup, and then you've got a North London derby, and there's physical energy and emotional energy that goes into that, and then, you know, towards the end, I don't think anybody, there were some issues with a couple of players here and there, but I don't think anybody played particularly badly. I don't think you can look at them and say they didn't try, that there wasn't the effort. And going out, you know, there were some people that I was at the game with, and they were just talking about, why didn't you try and do something else? Maybe you could bring on Kieran Tierney. Maybe you could throw on Kiwior and put Gabriel up front, some stuff like that. And it just sort of struck me that, you know, if we're reaching for those kinds of solutions, then it does say something about how we have been affected by injuries and who was missing and the state of the squad. So I think there is kind of an understanding that despite the frustration, there are factors that play into this in a fairly big way.
Definitely. And how much do you think the mood was affected by events at Brentford? Before the game,
it was all anyone was talking about.
Were you following that game?
I had live score on my phone, and it was 0-0. It was 0-0. It was 0-0. Got to the stadium, and there was about 10, 15 minutes of normal time remaining.
Right.
And I said, right, I won't check it. Because I'll jinx it in some way. Yeah. So I didn't check it, and then I ran into somebody who told me that they'd scored 2 late goals, and it was like, oh, fuck. And it was like the conversation, you know, everybody's chatting before the game and up for it and hoping that we'd win, but then it was like, fucking Liverpool, you know.
I know, man. I mean, listen, I'm to blame for that one. I'm in a WhatsApp group with a few mates. I'm the only Arsenal fan in there. And I think it must have been about the 88th minute, 0-0. I think Mo Salah had just missed a decent chance from the edge of the box, one you might expect him to take.
Yeah.
And I texted them saying, if, I think I used 2 ifs, if, and then in caps, if Liverpool dropped points, I think it would have been 5 out of the last 8 games in which they would have failed to win. And I sort of made the point, a team in that form, you'd think, well, they definitely can be caught. Pretty much as soon as I finished typing the message, as soon as I got 2 ticks through on the WhatsApp, Darwin Núñez had indeed scored. And by the time I think I was then replying saying, oh dear, and then by the time I finished sending that message, he'd scored again.
Oh. Well, I mean, to be fair, you did try and make up for it by injuring yourself yesterday, but not sufficiently to get Arsenal to win.
I put my back out, but even that couldn't get us the 3 points.
So let's get into it. I guess the team news obviously at the start was that William Saliba was missing with a hamstring strain. We don't quite know the seriousness of it yet.
There'd been rumours, hadn't there, on social media, and there's a little clip that's doing the rounds of the very end of the North London derby where he sort of goes on a quite impressive run in like the 93rd minute or something, gets to the halfway line and stops quite sharply. And I remember Clive actually saying, maybe on the Arsenal Vision instant reaction, that he'd kind of spotted Saliba holding his hamstring.
Was this before or after his singing?
I think this was before, because at the time he was saying, that's how close we are to losing another player. We're kind of getting away with it here. We've got a thin squad that's really stretched. Well, it turns out we didn't get away with it. And listening to Mikel Arteta after the game, it sounded potentially more serious than we'd been led to believe before the game.
Yes. So that was obviously going to require some kind of reshuffle. And what he has done this season often is play Thomas Partey at right back. So I don't think it was a surprise that he played there. Jurriën Timber moved across into centre half. That's kind of what I thought was going to happen.
So
there is, I suppose, a discussion about that, given the lack of success we seem to have when Thomas Partey plays at right back. And look, I think it's important to point out, it's not down to him just being at right back. That I think he started 7 games there. We've won one of those games.
Right.
I don't think you can just say, well, it's all his fault. But is there maybe sufficient evidence now that he might need to find a different solution, albeit acknowledging that there's no Ben White, there's no Takahiro Tomiyasu, there's no William Saliba, no Ricardo Calafiori in the squad as well. So options are...
That's an entire back four.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? So there are restrictions in terms of what he can do. Would you be, hopefully it's not a situation we have to face too much more often this season, but would at this point you be inclined to think of a different way of doing it? Like you could play Kivior at centre half. That's a possibility. I can sort of see why he wouldn't against Ollie Watkins, to be honest. He could also play Declan Rice there. Leave Timber at right back. If you want to use Partey in midfield with Marino and Odegaard, you can do that. And I think the idea of sort of moving loads of people out of position isn't ideal, but you're still only moving one player in inverted commas out of position because you're keeping Timber at right back. Rice has played centre half more in his career than Partey will have played right back. I think it feels like a more natural solution to me than Partey at right back, where I think there was good and bad to his game, but obviously he struggled on the goals as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Mikel Arteta has spoken previously and said where possible he wants to make fewer changes. He'd rather make one change than 2, and maybe that's the way he could have done that. Kept Timber at right back, kept that continuity, kept Partey in midfield. To give Partey his due, and I know defensively he had his lapses yesterday and they were costly.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument we miss him in the midfield when he steps out of there and into the right back area. Maybe Arteta was thinking Rice had a stormer against Spurs in midfield. I've got to keep him there for his energy, for his drive. I can understand the decision that he made. I hear people who say put Kivior at centre back, but listen, most Arsenal 11s I pick don't have Jakub Kiwior in them in the nicest possible way. I don't think he's at the level of some of our other players. It was not an ideal situation he was in. Will he reflect on it this morning and think, maybe I got that wrong? Possibly. When we've never seen the Rice at centre-back thing from the start of an Arsenal game. We might have seen him drop in there like in the latter stages, but I'd be curious to see it. I think we're at the point where the stat you have about winning games or not winning games with Partey at right back is quite compelling, so maybe it's worth a try.
Yes. Obviously, the ideal solution would be to get Ben White back or Takahiro Tomiyasu back and Saliba, and then you have those options for the right side of your defence. But it is what it is, and that's who we picked for yesterday's game, so we've got to analyse it through that lens. I thought it was, generally speaking, a decent first half from Arsenal. I think Villa had maybe one moment of danger. I think Raya had to make a save at one point, but overall I thought it was a decent half from us. We were the better side, maybe not quite as threatening as you would like, but I liked, for example, I thought the left-hand side was working quite well. Lewis-Skelly, who I'm sure we'll talk about again because amazing, but I thought Trossard and Merino were working quite well. There was a willingness maybe to take a shot from distance, just to try something a little bit different. And I think it was Merino who fed Trossard down the left-hand side for the goal. So there were encouraging aspects to that first half performance. Yeah,
there were. I mean, the threat, Villa always carry a threat because they've got good players, right? They've got Watkins and Rodgers, but I think their main chance in the half actually came off our throw-in, didn't it? Thomas Partey with
that was
a loose throw, shall we say?
That's one way of describing it. And diplomatic.
And Watkins, I think he might think he could have done better there. I mean, he's a really good finisher in most situations. But I liked us going forward. The left-hand side, I thought Trossard was really direct. I thought Martinelli looked energised, and even though that's not his strongest position, I think he made a really good fist of it, playing on that right-hand side. So there were things like Havertz looked like he had a bit more life in him maybe than he has done of late. Obviously he's been ill and he's, I think, pretty fatigued, playing a lot of minutes, but I thought this was a decent performance from him. Mikel Merino, who I've seen some criticism of this morning and certainly in recent weeks, I thought had one of his better games, actually.
Me too. I thought this was probably the best game he's had for Arsenal. I know we can talk about him in light of the
Tielemans goal.
The Tielemans goal, but generally speaking, in terms of what he brought to the team when we were in possession, and he did win a lot of headers and those kinds of things.
He loves a duel.
He loves a duel. I want to look at the stats now in a second, but I think there were encouraging signs from him. When we were playing it in their half, there was that moment where I think he will probably think he could do better defensively. I'm just shocked. I didn't think Tielemans could run.
He's done really well at Villa, hasn't he? Obviously was heavily linked with Arsenal, I think, for more than one summer, and the concern was at the time, does he have the athleticism? But Villa have found a system and a way of playing that seems to support him, and he looks a player right now. 5 aerials won by Mikel Merino yesterday.
One ahead of Gabriel and Thomas Partey, who had 4 each.
But I thought it was the other aspects of his game that stood out to me in terms of his use of the ball, his touch, a few nice sort of little flicks and touches around the penalty box. We've seen bits and pieces of that, but maybe not quite enough. So I agree, the left-hand side was a sign for encouragement, potentially.
Right, so we go in 1-0 up at the break, and it's a good position to be in.
What did you think, by the way, on the goal of the goalkeeper? Did you think?
I thought it was dodgy, I think I would be unhappy with our goalkeeper if he let that one in.
Well, it's one of the things that's maybe most sad about letting that lead slip, is that certainly in the North Bank in the second half we were having a great time at the expense of Emi Martinez.
Emi Martinez.
He's one of our own.
He's one of our own. I heard that song go up, and it was 2-0 at that point, and I was laughing, but then there was part of me going, I don't think it was the song's fault either, to be honest.
No, but I did like the goal. Trossard really direct, going on the outside, scored a left-footed goal in the week. I think set up 2 left-footed goals this week. And Martinelli's anticipation, I thought, to get across his man and get onto that finish quickly was good.
Yes, good movement. Ball just about went over the line, but it is over the line. The referee's watch buzz. It doesn't matter. It's over. It's in. It's 1-0. And then pretty quickly into the second half, we're 2-0 up. I was saying to people, it would be great if Kai Havertz could score a goal. I think he and Odegaard are the two players I thought yesterday could really do with a goal or a goal contribution to their names.
Yeah.
And he got it. It's really good work from Trossard again. I think his movement, and I was watching him closely in the second half in particular, because pretty much everything dangerous about Arsenal in the second half came down the left-hand side.
True.
I was looking at, he was up against Matty Cash, who's quite quick. His movement was just excellent, really sharp, and I think the quality of that ball in to Havertz is excellent. Havertz, good movement, takes it first time. I know it goes in off the goalkeeper, but he's there. It doesn't matter. It's in. It's 2-0, and that's a really good position for Arsenal to be in. Yeah,
really nice goal. Trossard's got sort of the snake hips back, I think. Maybe feeling a bit of confidence after the goal in midweek. And you make a good point about the left and right hand side. It was almost like Arsenal's conventional approach was sort of flipped in this game, where you had Martinelli, who was a bit freer off the right and kind of making off the ball runs and stuff, whereas a lot of the build up was coming on the left. But yeah, I really like that, and I was pleased for Kai Havertz. It's classic centre forward play, really. Gets across his man to the near post. Almost a Giroud goal, really.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a good description.
Yeah,
that's a good description. That's a lead that we should keep.
Yeah,
it's a lead
that was the high point.
That was the high point. And there was your songs about Emi Martinez and all the rest of it. Now, maybe you remember this better than I do, but I feel like their first goal came after we had a really good chance to drive into their box. I think Martinelli broke up field from, I think it could have been a corner. They could have had a corner.
Oh, yeah.
Martinelli broke up field. And I'm not saying he was one-on-one, but there was a defender there which I felt like he could have tried to commit that defender, tempt him into a tackle, push the ball beyond him, whether he gets there or not, if he's got the pace or got the legs, or maybe a bit fatigued having carried the ball all the way from our half. I don't know, but he sort of stopped and turned back, and there was that disgruntlement at us doing that again, which I can understand completely, because I just love, if he'd lost it in that moment, I'm all right with that. You know what I mean? I'm all right with him trying something and losing the ball high up the pitch, having taken some responsibility, having taken the ball on from our box. If he loses it, he loses it. But sort of going back, and then I don't know how we lose possession, but I think a few seconds later, they have the ball in the net,
Yeah, and we know Martinelli, well, certainly previously, had it in his locker to do that. You think of that goal at Stamford Bridge, for example. I know, it might feel a bit harsh that we're saying, well, why did he simply not run the entire length of the pitch
and score? That's not what I meant.
No, but I felt the same in the ground, and there were sort of a few grumbles at that. Even though he did initially retain possession, it felt like maybe there was a moment to kill the game there. Villa go up the other end, and I've watched this goal back a few times, and sort of I've seen the build up, and I think there are a few issues with Arsenal. I equally think it's a brilliant delivery from Luca Dean that he's a great crosser of the ball for all his other flaws. Tielemans makes that run. As we've said, he's not the quickest, he's not necessarily the most physical. I do think you'd want Mikel Merino to maybe stay with him slightly better than he does.
Yeah, I think we can close it down better as well. I think Partey could do a little bit more. I think Merino can't let Tielemans run off him goal side that way. I know on Match of the Day they were talking about maybe Declan Rice not dropping into the...
And Justin Timber,
yeah.
Kept calling him Justin Timber, which was slightly surreal.
Yeah, someone paint a picture of him by a lake.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was impeccable best from a defensive perspective. I mean, my overriding feeling coming out of the game, and I texted you this immediately after full time, is just with William Saliba on the pitch, I don't know if we concede either of those goals.
No, I don't think we do.
Yeah.
I don't think we do. Or, you could make the same point if you have Ben White at right back,
sure.
or if you have Jurriën Timber at right back. It's
yeah.
It's those small things, which isn't to pin it all on the right back in that particular instance. But I know exactly what you mean. Like with Saliba, there's just more. There's more presence and maybe a bit more organisation. And does Tielemans make that run even into the box if Saliba's in there? You know what I mean? Those small little things that can have an impact on the game. But that gave Villa wind in their sails, didn't it? You know, we looked a little bit deflated, having conceded sort of out of nothing because we were in a comfortable position. I think we were still dominating the game in terms of where it was being played, in terms of possession. And all of a sudden, your lead, which looked comfortable, is now slender. They hit the post.
Yeah, it was Tielemans again, I think.
Yeah.
It reminded me a bit of that spell in the first half of the Spurs game where it seemed like we were totally in control, and then they had a flurry of chances back to back. Not quite sure how to analyse that or why that would be, but it does feel like, I don't know. It's almost like when we concede that first chance or that first goal, maybe panic's too strong a word, but that sort of anxiety sets in.
Yeah, for sure. So they hit the post and then they equalise. It's a really good cross from Matty Cash on his
left foot. It's crazy.
It's absurd, the quality of the delivery. But what did Mikel Arteta say about the defending? He wasn't best pleased, that's for sure. Just trying to get it up in today's blog. But it was the second one is not at the standards we require. Defending the way we did, especially with one of the goals, it cannot be part of our game.
Yeah.
And I think this is one where I would ask a bigger question of Thomas Partey than the first one, because he has Watkins. I don't quite know what he's thinking. He steps up. I don't know if he's trying to play offside. It's clearly the wrong thing to do. I know people will say, well, he's not a natural right back, but he's 31 years of age. He's plenty experienced. He will have been drilled, on what they do in those situations. They will have done that work on the training ground. Watkins gets off the back of him. The quality of the ball is very, very good. The quality of the finish is very, very good, but we're found wanting defensively there.
Yeah, and I think, you make a good point about the fact he's not a defender, but he should still know. I mean, if I remember rightly, I think it comes off the second phase of a set piece. There's a ball into the box, it's cleared, and Arsenal kind of reshape, reorganise. And frankly, all the outfield players will have been drilled on those situations.
They were doing that drill in the warm-up. I saw the back four do that very drill in the warm-up. They're in a line, they're all looking across the line, and they're moving in tandem. I don't know if there's a signal or if there's a word or whatever it is, but they did that drill in the warm-up, and this time.
I mean, again, maybe if William Saliba's in there, the communication's better. Maybe he's the organiser in the group. We don't know. I mean, I'd be amazed if he's louder than Gabriel. Few people are on a football pitch. But, yeah, I think this is a clear individual error. And the result of it is you've got Ollie Watkins completely unmarked at the back post. And no surprises, that leads to an equaliser.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but Rice was having some very stern words with Partey.
Right.
After that, as Villa were celebrating, they were talking in the box, and it carried on all the way up to the kickoff again. And the two of them were going at it a bit. Rice more than Partey, obviously. I think Partey was being told things.
Maybe he was offering to swap.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll go in a right back.
Yeah, you go in here. It might not have been a bad idea.
Yeah.
What did you make of how the stadium reacted to that second goal and being 2-2? Did anything strike you?
I have to say, I don't really remember. I think I was sort of in my own world of anxiety at that point. Why? What was your thought?
My thought was that it was, and I'm not blaming the crowd here or anything like that, but my thought was that the response Because sometimes we've seen this quite a bit in recent seasons in particular, when there is a setback, there is an immediate sort of groundswell of like, come on.
Like was it Saliba own goal?
Yeah, exactly. You know, we've seen that quite a lot. And I understand this season is different because of expectations and because, you know, maybe there is we're a little battle weary, you know, because we've had these setbacks this season. But it just struck me that there wasn't quite that intensity to the crowd reaction. And it occurred to me that everybody in that stadium knew that we had no real way of changing the game from the bench. I think if you've got like 2 or 3 players on the bench who you know can come on and make a difference, it just sort of feeds the crowd, feeds the atmosphere a little bit. There'd be people going, change something, do something. Nobody was saying, bring on the subs, because all we could see was like all the left backs, the young centre half, the 2 kids who were probably never going to get on anyway, and Raheem Sterling. So I did feel like, I could be completely wrong here, but I felt like there was something a little bit missing, and it was tied to the fact that you could see those players, and some of those players are absolutely running on fumes in the last 15, 20 minutes. You can see that. They've played a lot. They've played a lot of minutes and played a lot of high-intensity minutes over the last 2-3 weeks in January. And that sense that we still have something in the tank wasn't there.
That's really interesting. Now you say that does ring true. I think football fans know, don't they? They know their team, and they know what they've got in the tank and what they've got in reserve. And I think fatigue is a theme for the club this season. Obviously, there's the most obvious manner in which that's true. The physical example, you know, a lot of players playing a lot of minutes due to injuries and lack of depth in certain parts of the pitch. But I do think there's a fatigue around what Arsenal have experienced over the last 2 years, you know, those very grueling campaigns without the relief and the reward of victory at the end, you know, the ultimate triumph in lifting a trophy. And I think there's a bit of fatigue among the crowd at the present point in time. I mean, we're in this run of home games. And I think that what's happened over the last 2.5 years might be taking a bit of a toll. And maybe that is impacting on the atmosphere. But yeah, maybe I'm in the minority, but when I looked at the clock, you know, Villa equalised, there was 20 minutes to go. I sort of thought, we can at least have a go at this, you know. It's not, what I was worried about when it got to 2-1 was the 90th minute equaliser. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh, we could get the real sucker punch here. In a way, when they scored, I was like, well, they've scored quite early. You know, so there's room for us to come back. But maybe I was being a bit optimistic. I mean, you know, despite the limitations, despite the lack of options, we certainly had our moments.
Yeah, for sure. Like, this is what I mean. I don't really have any big issue with the players and what they tried to do and how they tried to do it. Again, it felt like the left side was going to be more dangerous. You know, there was the Marino shot that hit the post and Trossard followed up, and you know, I was looking at that going, this is absolutely going to squirt between Martinez's legs. It's going to go in off his heel, and it'll be like a hat-trick of goals that he sort of had the last touch going into the net, but it didn't turn out to be the case. And then obviously there was the Havertz goal that was disallowed.
That was tough.
There's a lot of, you know, I've seen a lot of discussion about that, and certainly in the pub last night there was one replay and I'm looking at it going, what? But there is one from behind where it's accidental, he doesn't mean it, his hands are by his side, but the rule is if it touches your arm or your hand and it goes in the back of the net, then it's going to be disallowed. That's the rule, and I think it does hit his arm. Yeah,
it's interesting because the view they showed in the stadium was the kind of, from Marino's perspective, effectively, as he hits the shot.
People went mad.
Yeah.
People were going mad because it was like, oh, they're not going to take this away from us. Then they show the replay, and that particular replay, it just looks like it comes off his side.
His side or his stomach or his chest. I mean, that replay is quite interesting because I showed it to a few different people, and if you show it to someone and say, look, it hits his stomach, they'll see that. But if you say, look, it hits his hand, they'll see that. It's kind of it's one of those weird sort of what's that called?
Optical illusion
things. Yeah. I think having looked at it probably an unhealthy amount of times this morning, I think it does hit his right forearm. I think we can debate if that's fair, if that's right, if that should be the law, but I think we all know that it is.
Yeah.
I think Kai Havertz maybe knew that it was. There's a little bit of footage of him chatting with Thomas Partey afterwards and looking a bit sheepish. But it was a cruel moment because we've spoken about having a season where it feels like the marginal moments aren't quite going in our favour.
Yeah.
And that would have been a big one.
That would, yeah, for sure.
Because, it was a bit of luck, really, that it hit Havertz and went in the back of the net. But such bad luck where it hit him. He's not trying to handle it.
No.
And again, I think Arteta said that kind of takes the wind out of everyone's sails. It changes the mood, it changes the momentum, makes it hard. We still had
7 minutes,
and we still had a big moment with Leandro Trossard, which was flagged offside. But I've got to say, having seen the replay, they definitely would have had to check that.
They 100% would have had to check that. I watched that because I downloaded Match of the Day this morning and I was looking at it. I was trying to sort of freeze frame it from the point where Lewis-Skelly... I mean, what a great ball that is from Miles Lewis-Skelly. What a superb pass.
Shame. It would have been another brilliant moment for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's probably offside given the way he's leaning, but it's hard to tell from the angle, the match day angle, and when they draw the lines, who knows? But,
honestly, who knows?
Like, missed it.
They did flag it, which was quite surprising in some ways because it was so close in real time.
Yeah,
would have been interesting to see.
Yeah. How bad would it have felt to have 2 goals disallowed by VAR?
That's true. Yeah, I mean. Does Trossard do a lot wrong? Not massively. I mean, it's kind of...
No, I mean, he's got a big goalkeeper in front of him. He's got to go for the far corner.
Yeah.
He's good enough to put that in the back of the net, Trossard.
Oh, yeah, and he knew that afterwards.
Yeah.
He was pretty frustrated, but it's just one of those, isn't it? And subs-wise, Sterling came on to no real effect, I would say. I mean,
they were trying to pump him up on the sideline.
Were they?
Yeah. Arteta was
literally.
Yeah, literally. They had him.
Yeah, it'd be good if he was a foot taller.
Yeah, and good at football anymore.
I have to say, I don't take any pleasure in saying this, and I know we talked about this after the United game. I thought we had a better day that day, and then the Spurs cameo, not so good. Yesterday, not so good. I've got to tell you, where I'm stood in the crowd, there's a bit of a tension bubbling there, like a bit of a palpable mutterings when he loses the ball.
Yes, there was one where he lost the ball in their half and then made a foul. If you remember, I think he got booked for it. It was a fairly cynical foul because he didn't want Villa to break up field, but he made the kind of foul which allowed them to take the sting out of the final few minutes a little bit. And look, they were doing that all day. I don't know how long Martinez was allowed to take over his goal kicks. Morgan Rogers was careering around the place, not getting a booking until, I don't even know if he got booked eventually, but they were very happy with the point. There's no question about that they were playing for that point at that stage. And I think when Sterling came on, had zero effect from an attacking perspective, and then did something like that around me, there was quite a bit of frustration at that too, and at him. And actually, I have to say I find it kind of a bit sad to see somebody who was such a good player look so far from the level that's required.
Yeah.
I can't really be angry at him at this point because I just look at him and go, whatever you had, man, it's kind of gone.
It is, and I actually have quite fond memories of watching Raheem Sterling, almost particularly at Liverpool when he broke through, 17, 18 years old, in that Brendan Rodgers team. I forget who played it, but Daniel Sturridge was in that side, and they played with such verve, and he was so I mean, he was sensational at that age. It really was. And a player I really loved to watch. So I agree with you. It is quite painful to see where he's at now. I don't feel particularly angry. I think he's having quite a bad time of it. I don't necessarily get the sense that that's his fault. I sort of think Arsenal took a punt on him, and you can certainly query that decision and why that decision was made. But yeah, I don't really blame him for being bad. I just think, unfortunately, he is quite bad at the moment. On the subs, was there anything else you think Arteta could have done or tried?
I mean, the thing about it is, Trossard was probably our best player on the day, I thought. He was certainly up there. So you can't take him off. Miles Lewis-Skelly was brilliant again and produced that pass right at the end for Trossard.
Yeah. That's, by the way, and this makes a fool of me, really, because that's the one change I was thinking, surely he's going to put Zinchenko on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe Zinchenko for Lewis-Skelly.
Because Lewis-Skelly's not played a lot of 90 minutes, and at his age, he's been in a really tough physical battle with Morgan Rogers, who played off the right-hand side for Villa. A battle he won, I have to say.
Yeah, by some distance.
Yeah. And I thought he was brilliant, and he produced that amazing pass, so obviously it was the right call to leave him on, but I guess I only raise it because I think it just tells us where Zinchenko's at in Arteta's thinking.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the idea that maybe you could put Zinchenko on for Merino is, it's not outrageous to think that, but it was Merino's shot towards the end as well.
I just think 12, 18 months ago, all Zinchenko's experience and talent on that bench, he surely would have been used in some capacity.
Yeah.
And the fact that he wasn't, he was the only guy I was looking at on the bench being like, could he have a role to play?
Yeah, beyond that, with all due respect to the two kids, the Hale End boys who are on the bench, I don't think they were ever going to get on. And Sterling was basically the only attacking option we have, which I think speaks volumes about, what we don't have at this moment in time. And that was certainly something Arteta made that point afterwards, right? So he's talking about how proud he was of his players. I think he used the word immense about the performance, because they really did dig deep yesterday. And look, we made some mistakes and we got punished for those mistakes. But for me, this is a game where the drop points not entirely come down to what we didn't have on the bench. And I think what I'm going to say, I've got the quote here, because he was asked about the Liverpool game. And he said their subs made the impact, managed to change the game. On our side, it was the opposite. When you look at the bench, probably you can say, I think we are very short. And that's definitely...
You can take the probably out.
Yeah, you can take the probably out. So I feel like, as we're trying to analyse this and as we're trying to figure ways of understanding why we dropped those points beyond the mistakes that we made, the goals that we conceded, I think Premier League games are often really, really tight. And ultimately it's about what you can do in the attacking third when a game goes like this. What else can you do to cause the opposition problems? We had to do what we'd been doing all game, and we still caused them problems. But you can't help but think, wow, if we just had another attacking midfielder, if we had another striker, if we had a winger on that bench, there were things that we could have done. Villa are playing a lot at the moment as well, so they've got tired legs. Get some fresh guys on. There was
look what they had to bring on. John Duran.
Yeah.
I think they brought Leon Bailey on, did they, on the right hand side?
Yeah, they brought on Leon Bailey with about 5 minutes to go, and everyone around was going, fuck. Because you know what he's like.
Yeah. Exactly.
He's quick and direct and can hit the ball. And
I mean, that's probably why Zinchenko didn't get on, to be honest.
I think that's a good point.
I'm trying to think who else they brought on, because they made a couple of changes quite early. They had a strong bench, much stronger than ours.
They brought on Luca Dean, didn't they, at halftime for Maatsen, who had been booked. They had to take Onana off, and they put Bogard on.
Oh yeah, I don't know much about him.
Me neither.
But
Look at the bench as well. They still had Emi Buendia and Daniel Malen, who they've just brought in.
Wow.
You know, so you look at what they had on the bench from an attacking perspective. I'm not saying those are the guys for us, but they had the option.
Yeah. I think did they even use Marlon in the end? He was stripped off, but I think maybe he didn't come on. Liverpool, I haven't seen what their 11 was at Brentford, but I imagine they brought on Darwin, probably Harvey Elliott, like good attacking players, right? Who Tsimikas they often use as an attacking sub to just give them like width and drive on the left hand side in the second half of games.
Robertson and Nunez came on, then Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, and then a sort of last throw of the dice, they brought on Chiesa.
Who was involved
Gakpo,
actually. Yeah. I think quite a few attacks in that final phase. So yeah, there's a gulf in terms of what's available. And as ineffective as Sterling has been, the reality is I think we're in a position where we're having to use him because we can't risk asking Martinelli and Trossard to play 90 minutes 3 times a week.
Yeah, I think he was only used yesterday because he kind of felt like he had to do something. He had to try something. I don't think it was a substitution made with the confidence that Raheem Sterling was going to come on and make a difference. You know, we talked a little bit, we talked a few times maybe about moments or games where we've needed a goal and Sterling hasn't been used.
Yeah,
right? And we were trying to figure out why that is, and I think we're seeing why that is at this point, that whatever Arteta has seen on the training ground over the 6 months that he's been here greatly informs how he's been using Raheem Sterling. I mean, what do you think of Arteta's post-game comments? Is it like a message to on high that we need something, we're short in attack, look at the difference between us and Liverpool? Or is he just kind of being honest about where we are?
I think he's just saying it as he sees it, honestly. I mean, of course, implicit within that is a bit of a cry for help, but I think that's evident. Frankly, I think from the minute Gabriel Jesus was stretched off against Manchester United, he didn't need to say another word. Like, it spoke for itself at the time. And yeah, I don't think he's playing games or anything like that. You know, some people might say, "Oh, did he make less changes because he's making a point?" I don't think we're in a position to make those sorts of gestures. He's just trying to do the best he can, and I actually think he's managing his resources pretty well, considering. You know, for all our frustrations, we haven't lost a lot of games in this period. We lost the 2 Cup, but in the league our record's been decent. It's just the context of the title race, I think, that makes it particularly painful, because it just looks like a very tall task now. And in terms of the performance itself, I do kind of feel like there's this phenomenon occurring where sort of the goalposts keep moving, and the sort of issue with the team, it's been sort of several things and it's evolved. So at one point it was, well, we don't create chances. Then it was like, well, we do create them, but we don't score them.
Yeah.
And then against Villa, it's, well, we gave away a lead, you know. And I kind of feel they're sort of all true to an extent. And I think it probably just tells you about our overall deficiencies, really, and key personnel absent. I mean, Saliba, I think we learned, didn't we, 2 seasons ago, quite how instrumental he is and what a difference it makes when he's not available.
Yeah, to be fair, you know, that is something that we did try and plan for, because in an ideal world, if Saliba is not there, you can move Jurriën Timber to centre half, or Ben White to centre half, or Takahiro Tomiyasu to centre half, or, you know, and you have those options. You've got your 3 options for right back with Tomiyasu and White and Timber, and those 3 players can play at centre half as well. So it's not a case that we built the squad where a Saliba injury means we've got, with all due respect, a Rob Holding in there.
We couldn't have bought more defenders.
No, exactly. Maybe we will.
That's the one thing we've definitely done.
Yeah,
is bought defenders. I suppose you could debate, have we bought injury-prone defenders? You know, in some instances there were definitely warning signs. Calafiori would be one. Zinchenko might be one. Tomiyasu and White, I think that was harder to anticipate. They didn't really have that history.
No.
And Ben White, to be fair to him, has played so much football since joining the club. Timber was a freak ACL thing. So, yeah, but I think his absence, and I think Saka's absence, I honestly think it's just so enormous, missing Bukayo Saka. I think we'll talk about like the amount of injuries we've suffered, the inconsistency in the starting 11, the little tweaks and changes we've had to make. I hear all that, but I think that pales in comparison to one player, and that's the absence of Bukayo Saka.
Do you think, would you draw, let's say, a line between Saliba and Saka in terms of what their presence gives Arsenal on the pitch, a sort of an aura that, with all due respect to anyone who tries to fill those shoes, and people have done it and to varying degrees of success, that when you see Saka on the team sheet, when you see Saliba on the team sheet, it sort of hits different, right? It's sort of like if you're going to go and play Liverpool and Van Dijk and Salah are not in the team, you're like, okay, this is not the best version of Liverpool. And I do wonder if that, I often wonder about, when a big player is injured and a manager says, well, this is an opportunity for somebody else to come in and show what they can do. I just remember, myself, and this is not to draw any parallels between my footballing career and what happens in the Premier League, but I remember that if we're going into a game and we don't have, our best midfielder or we don't have our best winger, you're always just a little less certain about the things that you do on the pitch or your ability to get a result. And I do wonder if when our players go out on that pitch, as professional as they are and confident as they are in their own abilities and each other, that when you don't have Saka, when you don't have Saliba, it just is there in the background subconsciously somewhere. And I don't know, I could be grasping at straws here, but I do feel like it must have some sort of an impact, even on something as intangible as confidence.
Absolutely. There's obviously a tactical and technical impact, but there's a psychological impact as well. I think the point you make about if Liverpool were without Van Dijk and Salah, those players are our equivalents.
Yeah.
Saka and Saliba. And, who would be the third most important Liverpool player? Maybe you'd say Alexander-Arnold, he's their main creator. Well, we were without our main creator for 2 months in Martin Odegaard. I think we've been severely hampered by those injuries. I know Saliba, we're talking about one game, Aston Villa, and hopefully it's not too many more than that. But the Saka one, I don't want to sort of, I don't want to be writing any epitaphs or anything, but a Saka injury for 3 months, I think he's so important to Arsenal that is potentially a season killer. I really do think he's that important, and nothing I'm seeing in his absence is kind of changing how I feel about that.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, will we take a little break here?
I think we should, Andrew. That was a bit bleak, wasn't it?
Is it bleak? Yeah, I just think it's realistic. We're about 48
See, the
minutes
phrase
in.
season killer hangs quite heavy in the air.
Yeah, it does. It's as grey as the sky outside this hotel room window. It's a great
We're going to jump out of that now. There is no part 2.
Thank you, folks. It's been fun. Thanks for being with us. Look, we'll take a little break and we'll come back with some questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you sent to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com, and also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Would you like to go first?
Oh,
Given it's your hometown.
Sure. Well, that's very kind. I'll go first. I'll level with you guys. They're not cheerful, most of these questions. I'm desperately looking for like a lighter touch, Okay, what about this? Ben Stewart. He's on Blue Sky. And he says, morning, guys. Are we in danger of the Cronkies keeping the powder dry until the summer due to our constantly dropping points? we're so desperate for players, but with injuries returning for the UEFA Champions League knockouts, they may hold the line, effectively writing the season off. And I'd seen a few people...
Yeah, I saw a few questions like that, actually.
Yeah, saying things like that.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, the balance between... If what you spend now has a significant impact on what you can do in the summer, then I'm sure that's part of the consideration. It's got to be part of why maybe we're, January 19th and nothing has happened yet. I think. So I can understand why they might have those conversations. The league looks... the chance is much slimmer now, I think.
I think if they were on the fence... Let's say after the Spurs game, they were on the fence about a hypothetical 60 million investment.
Yeah.
I feel like the Villa game would make them go, yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I mean, I know it sounds absurd in one respect. I actually said this a few weeks ago. I think we talked about it then. It might have been after the Brighton game where I was like, I know the need is apparent to us all, but I have this sort of sneaky feeling that they might say, you know what, it's not our year. Let's regroup and go again in the summer.
I think my response to that at the time was that
you're an idiot, James.
not that, but that we still had.
I know
the cups to play for, and we still had the Champions League to play.
How
for.
naive of you, Andrew!
Exactly, what a fool I am. But I mean, I think that was a valid point at the time, and maybe make the argument that if we got something done more quickly in January, perhaps we win that. Perhaps we win that Manchester United game because we've got something else in attack that gets us a goal that wins the game, you know? And similarly, there is a second leg against Newcastle where if you get somebody in, as Bournemouth showed yesterday, Newcastle can be vulnerable.
Well, Cliver, if we could sign him for Bournemouth, that might help.
Anyone who scores a goal, we should buy. That's what I'm seeing on social media these days. You know, so I kind of get it, but I also think there is another aspect to this, which is that there's probably a connection between how much we're asking of the players that we have and some of the injuries that we have. And therefore you get into this vicious circle of a smaller squad, more physical demands, issues with fatigue, with form, with, you know, trailing off in games instead of finishing games strongly. You're like hanging on in there, and potentially more injuries. So I think the need to bring somebody in goes above and beyond what they might be able to give us from, let's say, it's a winger who can score lots of goals. That'd be amazing. We'd all love that. But it does take a little bit of the pressure off some of the other players, and therefore perhaps you get more out of them because they're not absolutely fucking knackered.
Yeah. I think... Because also what you don't want to happen is that you get dragged into a battle for Champions League qualification or anything like it. And, you know, there's teams behind us who are in good form, like Forest and Newcastle, Manchester City, who've strengthened significantly in January. Who knows what we'll get from them in the second half of the season. So, you know, as much as I think that could be a factor for the owners when deciding whether to spend this month, I still think some sort of action is necessary just to kind of ensure our position. You know, maybe it changes the strategy from, okay, we're going to go big and, you know, land a big fish for a big check, but we still need something. Like, we still need some alternative to Gabriel, Martinelli, Trossard, Havertz. Maybe it makes the thinking more of like, what can we do that's short term? You know, what can we do that's a loan? But I just cannot foresee us coming out of this window without an attacker. I think that really runs the risk of seeing the season go in the wrong direction.
I think that's true, yeah.
I mean, one question that I didn't find when scrolling through was a sort of direct question of, is the league gone? And I'd like to know what you think on that.
What is it? It's 6 points with a game in hand.
6 points with a game in hand, yeah.
I mean, it's mathematically or arithmetically, it is not gone. But I think we can all see that this is an Arsenal team that is probably going to drop some more points along the way.
Yeah.
I think that feels inevitable. I don't really see a 16 wins out of 18 run from this team, because I just don't think it has the quality, the depth, or the legs to do that. Look, the January schedule this year has been really punishing, hasn't it? Like, we 3 games in January last year, and we've already played 6.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I think it's 9 in January or something.
Yeah,
like that.
There's 9 games this January. I would say yes, it is probably gone, because if Liverpool do drop some points, I think we're also going to drop some points along the way.
I think the thing is, as fans, we're always kind of inclined to find a narrative that gives us hope. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's the game of being a supporter. Like, that's the joy of being a supporter. And, you know, after Wednesday night and we beat Spurs, and like I say, after 80 minutes between Brentford and Liverpool, I was clinging to all those, clutching all those straws, you know. I think if I put my rational hat on and my objective hat on.
Yeah, if you're looking at it from like a completely neutral point of view, which is very difficult.
The journalist, James McNicholas.
Yeah, but like, substitute Arsenal for another team, and Liverpool are there, and you look at them through the exact lens that we're looking at Arsenal, you would say that team has very little chance of winning the league.
And again, it's just, to me, it's just an enormous factor that we're without arguably our best player for, you know, another 2 months, potentially.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just Saka. Ben White is a big miss, I think, as well. Saliba's out. Jesus is out. And I know, you know, he hasn't been brilliant. We've been without Odegaard. We had a lot of questions like, is it too simplistic to put this season down to injuries? I did have one here from Tola on the Discord. Is it too simplistic to put the poor results we've had down this season to injuries? He said, I can't help feel the most significant obstacle to trophies this season has been the injuries, both in respect of their concurrent nature and the players who've been affected. Like, if we've been missing Zinchenko, Tierney, Kivior, you know, you can live with those injuries.
I do that trade,
Yeah.
I mean, we have been missing Zinchenko for quite a lot of it, to be honest. He was injured as well.
Yeah, but have we missed Zinchenko?
Yeah, fair point. It's a really big factor, isn't it? But I do think that as Arsenal fans, we're really inclined to look at our injury situation and maybe not necessarily at others. You know, other clubs have had big injury problems this season too.
Apparently Bournemouth have 9 players out injured.
Wow.
And they went to Newcastle yesterday and fucking destroyed them.
Yeah, and when I look at... I still think we've been putting out strong 11s. I hear the point about injuries in sort of similar areas of the pitch, but I think, look, there's no getting away from it. It's definitely been an issue, and I think it's laid bare that actually over the past couple of seasons we've generally had a really good run with injuries. I do think you have to talk as well about sort of squad composition and squad building, though. Like, as much as it's been painful to be without Martin Odegaard and Bukayo Saka, for example, did we really come into the season with a squad that was sort of sufficiently set up to protect against that, to mitigate against that possibility?
Yeah. I
don't think so. And some people will say, well, you can't replace your best players. And they are right. But you can have better options. And I think, I don't think we got that quite right. So, the injury numbers are mad. You know, we have had a lot of them, and the lack of consistency in terms of 11s we've been able to field is striking. So that's one of the big.
Yeah. What about this? Just sort of going between injuries and transfers.
Yeah.
Deza underscore VDV on the Discord says, morning gents, do we need to keep Zinchenko and Tierney this window due to our depleted squad? I say yes. And then there's sort of an adjacent question here with a couple like this on the Discord. Boston folks say Saka. How much are you both betting on us desperately needing at least one attacking transfer this month? And we'll go and buy coverage for Saliba. How Arsenal/Arteta inevitable does that feel? And Mark McFall on Blue Sky, given Tomiyasu seems unlikely to play again this season, White is out, and now it looks like Saliba could be out too. Does the club seriously need to consider signing another right-sided defender?
Oh my God.
I know.
And Cedric's still out there. He's still out there waiting for the call.
Cedric always finds a way.
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that we don't need to buy more defenders right now. I just think, well, I'm hoping that some of them will be back at some point soon. You know, I'm looking at Ben White, I'm looking at Tomiyasu, certainly looking at Calafiori and thinking these guys need to come back into the squad. I even think, and I hesitate to say this, but I even think we could probably afford to lose one of Zinchenko or Tierney in this window. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, at the moment, the manager doesn't really want to use either of them, and doesn't seem to want to use Zinchenko at all.
If you could keep one of them, who would you keep? Like, think not just like on an individual basis, but what the departure of one might mean for resources available if we find a new home for them.
Well, I think I'd let Zinchenko go.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think in Lewis-Skelly, you've got someone who emulates what Zinchenko offers from that position. I think both Lewis-Skelly and Calafiori are sort of comparable fullbacks to Zinchenko in the way they approach the game. Tierney is a different option. We're not getting any money for Tierney, probably whatever happens. We might get something, this window if we were to agree to that, some sort of compensation from Celtic, but it's not going to be a significant fee. Zinchenko, I think he's got at least another year or so on his deal, so if he went on loan, it would be with a view to a permanent transfer where we'd actually recoup something.
Yeah, I saw like the Dortmund story, Borussia Dortmund story, where there was talk of a loan with a 20 million either option or obligation, 20 million euros. Like,
you can't turn your nose up at
but
that.
Like, you can. Yeah, I think you have to. If you're looking for the club to spend, and we all are, and we all want that to happen, I think you have to make decisions which help facilitate that as much as possible. So in the context of where we are in this season, to me, it would make a lot more sense to let Zinchenko go on the basis that his departure could actually bring in a reasonable amount of money, whereas I think I agree with you, I don't think Tierney would.
And listen, with certain players, you might have a concern over them potentially having agreed a pre-contract with somebody. I remember Arsenal players being frozen out in similar situations way back. Sylvain Wiltord.
Yeah, that's right. Wiltord barely played.
Kanu as well, I think, because their deals were expiring, they just weren't really used. But I don't have any doubts about Kieran Tierney's attitude. I think he's a top professional and he's got a lot of respect for Arsenal and Mikel Arteta. They have a decent enough relationship despite, everything that's gone on. In terms of Tierney sort of losing his place and going out on loan, there's always been a lot of mutual respect. I think he's an alternative. He's a different style of fullback. I'd be very happy to see him stay until May. I've got no issue with it. But I still, I don't think we should go out and buy a right-sided defender. I think that we can. I think we can have enough hope that we'll get somebody back to sort of ease those issues.
Okay.
I feel like I've put the kiss of death on it there, but there you go.
Our words don't have that much power. Thankfully, the things that would happen if we had the power to do. Make the world different with our words.
I think the usernames of people are getting better and better. This one's from Blue Sky and it's Living Saliba Loca, which I enjoyed. Good morning. It's increasingly likely to be 5 seasons under Arteta with only an FA Cup as silverware. How concerned are you that fans and players may start to lose faith in the project?
That's always a concern. To be as good as we have been and not win anything, to not win things is frustrating, right? But if you don't win things because you're kind of mediocre, that's kind of easier to take because you can always see the solution. The pathway is get a new manager, get new players, spend more money, all of that. So it's frustrating not to win. It's even more frustrating not to win when you're as good as we are. And I know we all have our issues with this season and the way it has gone, but I think we have to recognise that Arsenal are in second place despite all the things that we've talked about and all the factors that have played a part in this season. So is it a worry? Yeah, I think it is a worry because the best players want to win things. We've said that lots of times. How do I put this? Like, I struggle to think that if Arsenal, at the end of, let's say, pure hypothetical, we don't win anything this season and Arsenal say, sayonara, Mikel, it's time for you to go. Thanks for the memories, but it's time to go. I feel like we would be 95% more inclined to get another Unai Emery than a better Mikel Arteta.
What do you mean? Sorry, like you think
we would be more likely to get a more average manager than a better one.
You think if we were to twist rather than stick at the end of the season, our odds of finding someone better than Arteta are not
very
good.
low.
Yeah.
That's my thinking on that. Like, I'm not saying he's perfect. I'm not saying he's not without his flaws, but I just think as the man for the club right now, I still have faith that at the very least he is invested up to his eyeballs in bringing success to this club and trying to win things for this club and to get it to a level that he aspires to. Whereas I'm not saying there aren't other good coaches out there or other talented coaches. There are, obviously. I would question our ability on high to identify exactly who that person is and bring them in.
Yeah. It's an interesting point because most of, and perhaps all the people who appointed Mikel Arteta are no longer at the club. I think in that, Raul Sanllehi, Vinay, Edu, they were the key people involved. So it's difficult to know, isn't it? Like how we would proceed with that. And there's promising managers out there. We spoke about Bournemouth. I love the look of Iraola. I think he looks like a top coach for somebody.
Well, maybe we just go to San Sebastian.
The next Basque guy,
Go to the Basque region and just go find a football pitch and find the guy who's on the side. Yeah, come on, you're the guy.
But, when Unai arrived, he'd won plenty of trophies.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to pinpoint someone who's got that kind of winning track record. Well, I hear what you're saying. What do you think? And we might win something this season. There's still that crazy fan part of me that thinks the league, as long as it's not mathematically impossible, I'll have that little bit of hope. Champions League, perhaps we can talk about separately. But what if we were to arrive in May and not win a trophy? Despite what you may think, do you think the majority of Arsenal fans would still back the project, shall we say?
Well, it's very difficult to speak on
for them, Andrew.
Speak on behalf of the majority of Arsenal. I think I've seen it, and there are comments, and we see stuff online. There is some disquiet out there. There is there is always going to be that range of opinion out there. I think, again, I'm not speaking for the majority. Based on my interactions with fans on Arseblog, in our comments, the forum, on our Discord, all those kinds of things, I think the vast majority of people recognise the quality of the job that Mikel Arteta has done. Are they frustrated by the lack of silverware and maybe this summer's business not pushing us forward the way we would have liked after the previous two seasons? Absolutely. But I do think most people recognise what a job he's done in terms of changing the trajectory of the club and bringing us back to a level where seemingly not winning the title is unacceptable to certain people, whereas 5 years ago, that wasn't there. We all wanted Arsenal to win and do well and win trophies, but like not winning the league, that was just taken as a given. Whereas now, it feels like by not winning the league, we're falling short. I think if we talked about, stepping back and looking at things objectively, if you were to step back and look at it objectively, you would say, well, the guy who has raised the standards to that level has done a very good job.
I agree. And I do think there's probably a vocal minority out there who have either never taken to Mikel Arteta or who probably have held grievances over, I don't know, their favourite player leaving the club, whether it's Ozil or Aubameyang or whatever it might be. Pepe, of course, my favourite player. Or who, there are some sort of deep scars from that winter of 2020 and the signing of Willian. And I feel like when, we don't win a couple of games, that vocal minority are going to come to the fore, right? There's going to be a presence. But I do think most Arsenal fans are still on board, are understanding of the reasons, the mitigation. That's not to say they think Mikel Arteta is perfect, that he can do no wrong. Of course, he's human. But I think there is still patience and belief in the project. Someone asked me in the pub after the game, I think it was a Villa fan actually, he was there, deep cover, and they said to me, if Arsenal don't win this season, how much longer has Mikel Arteta got? And I think that probably tells you, the fact that they asked me that question, that if we don't win something this season, that's probably something that's going to be asked externally a lot.
Yeah.
Like the media will ask that question.
But it's a normal question to ask. Yeah. When a team comes as close as we have done, and when they've been as consistent as we have, that question about like when are you going to get it over the line, I think is a perfectly normal one, whether it's Arsenal or anybody else. And there's the balance, isn't it? And
I think, again, I don't take any pleasure saying this, but I think in terms of the sort of media narrative, I feel like the ghost of Pochettino looms quite large, of being like a coach who's clearly very able, but doesn't get over the line, And I think Arteta's probably going to encounter that narrative more and more if Arsenal don't win this season. But, I still think most people are on board. And my answer to that guy was, I think he certainly will have people's support at the end of this season, unless there's a major unravelling. And I think even 1 or 2 more years, there will still be a sort of enough patience to kind of sustain him.
Yeah.
But it all depends how and why as well.
That's true. These are the big questions. What about this one from Gagan J, who's at gaganj.bsky.social? He says, "Shitely morning, gents. Do we have a better shot in Europe than the league, as we'll have a chance to get players back before the later rounds, and our hard-to-beat style might suit two-legged cup competitions more than a marathon league campaign? Am I mad for believing?"
No, not mad at all. I mean, a lot will depend on the draw, I think Arsenal probably need to be in that top 8 more than they ever have because of how sort of thin the squad is. And I think those extra 2 games would be a burden for this group. But I don't look around Europe and see, it's only a handful of teams that you'd say you'd have above Arsenal as potential contenders.
I think, when you look at some of the teams out there and you look at what the difference might be, like, do Real Madrid or Barcelona have a central defensive partnership as good as Arsenal's? Absolutely not.
No.
Do they have a host?
Yeah, I was going to say the other end of the pitch they're doing okay.
That's what I mean. That sort of extra emphasis on having a range of attacking talent is probably the difference between what they can produce and what we might produce. We were having this conversation in the pub last night. You remember about like the Bayern game, and we didn't quite have enough to get a goal away in Bayern, and now we have less than we did.
I know.
So there is the sort of asterisk on that for me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I need to look at where the fixtures fall actually, but there is an optimistic part of my brain that's thinking could we have a Bukayo Saka back available for some of those latter stages in a way that might really augment our chances? That would obviously be a huge boost. I don't feel confident of it this morning. When I look at the squad, I can understand why someone might look at that and say we've got a better chance than the league. Ultimately, it's sort of fewer games. We might have more players back by that point in time. We do have that solid defensive unit to fall back on. But it still looks a tall order, doesn't it?
Yeah, it would be very difficult. It's the Champions League. We
never won it before.
Final. Yeah, I mean, it's overdue. That's for sure.
That's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Yeah.
We're due one.
The law of averages is on our side.
Okay, we spoke about Miles Lewis-Skelly. I thought it was an interesting question. Mark Tower said, as impressive as MLS's performance have been, what do you think is the next evolution of him? I think he's got more to give offensively, like the pass to Trossard late on, and at times he's playing a little with the handbrake on in the final third. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought that pass to Trossard was really instructive of what he could potentially become for Arsenal. He's been so good at left back. There's part of you thinks, okay, we've fucking sorted that position now for however many years it might be. At the same time, though, there is, a grounding in him playing in midfield, right, all the way through the youth teams. The question, the perennial question, the never-ending question about Arsenal's left eight, is that the answer before our eyes? Is it easier to get a good fullback than produce a very special academy player who could play in midfield and could play in midfield for years for this team? I mean, he basically plays in midfield as it is because of where he operates. So I think if you are looking long term, you could say, maybe the fullback positions, the way they've changed over the years, and particularly in recent years, like this idea of an inverting fullback was not something anyone considered. Maybe there comes a point where we go back the other way, or you're looking to stretch pitches with a more traditional fullback. Is that going to be his game? Do you take him out of areas on the pitch where he can really do damage? So I think midfield for him does make quite a bit of sense for me. Whether it's sooner rather than later, I'm not sure, but I see him as a fit in that position.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you look at the midfield and yes, there's that question mark over left eight. There's also question mark over number 6 to an extent. Thomas Partey and Jorginho out of contract this summer, but then talk of Zubimendi potentially coming in. That could, once you've got £150 million worth of talent potentially for that particular position at the base of midfield, I think it becomes difficult to see Miles getting many opportunities there. Maybe the left eight, we know Arteta likes a player who's very physical in that position, wins duels. He's certainly got that ability. Just listening to Mikel Arteta in his press conferences last week, I came away from them thinking that for the foreseeable future, he sees him as a left back. And I've not really got any issues with that because, as you point out, he's playing in midfield 70% of the time.
I mean, watching him yesterday, that's the first time. Well, did he play in Lisbon? I don't know if he did.
Not sure.
That's the first time I've seen him play live, and obviously I was watching quite closely. Because he's involved a lot, he's there a lot. I looked at that Villa side. We're a big team. That's a big Villa team as well.
Yeah, certainly.
They've got some big boys in there, and Lewis-Skelly, not the tallest, but certainly came up against Morgan Rogers, who's been really, really good and really impactful for Villa this season. There was one ball played down the second half. It was played down the left-hand side, aerial ball. He won it, took possession, made the pass, drove forward, and Morgan Rogers is on the fucking floor.
Yeah,
it's just so impressive to see what he's doing, and I think what he can do at left back at this moment in time. Arteta's rationale was at this moment, this is where the opportunity is for him, but maybe in 12 months or 18 months, as other players age out or whatever, the opportunity becomes a little bit further forward.
Yeah,
but I think his development has been amazing.
Bukayo Saka, of course, got his chance as a left back really, and evolved away from that. In terms of in game, listen, I think he's been brilliant, and I was full of praise for him after the Spurs game, particularly. He was good again yesterday. I think the original question that we had makes a good point. I do think there are moments where, in possession, occasionally he defers to others a little bit, or he plays the simple pass, the safe pass, and I think what's really exciting about him is that he has the potential to be a bit more ambitious than that.
For sure. There was I don't know, my angle on this was pretty good actually. In the second half, there was a run Kai Havertz made from the right-hand side into the sort of centre-forward channel. Lewis-Skelly had the ball, and Havertz was telling him to play it over the top and play it into that channel for him to run onto. He took the more simple option, which is, I think, to play it back to Gabriel or to Timber. And you could see Havertz sort of going, give me the ball. And he sort of acknowledged that and sort of held his hand up the way you do. But I wonder if next time, when that opportunity arises, he'll have the confidence to play that. I think it can only be a confidence thing, because he's only, 20 appearances?
Exactly. And it will come with time and seniority. I think out of possession, he has all the confidence in the world. I mean, he'll go into any duel or any shoulder to shoulder without hesitation and win it most of the time. I think in possession, you can sometimes see that he's not a senior player yet, but he's 18 years old and not long 18 years old.
That's it.
So, yeah, I think he's been doing brilliantly, and I think we'll see more of him. And Ricardo Calafiori will be watching and thinking, I thought I was coming to be first choice left back in this team, and he's got a fight on his hands now for sure.
Well, that can be a good thing. That can be a good thing as well. Okay, what about this one, just to sort of finish us off a little bit, because we've been going a while. JDH_41 on Discord says, morning guys, is there time between Newcastle on the 5th of February and Leicester on the 15th of February to go on a warm weather training break? Think it could do the world of good. So everyone's looking for that, the Dubai vitamin D injection into this team to get us going again.
I think it will happen. I think I mean, I think Arteta's alluded to them discussing it. That's the FA Cup fourth round weekend. And frankly, even before we'd played United, I think Arsenal were looking at that weekend, not to say they were anticipating defeat, but thinking if we don't go through, because bear in mind these are big organisational undertakings. I think they have to plan for every scenario. I think they'd already sort of earmarked that and thought that could be the time. Dubai had a sort of, I'm going to say, magical effect on us last season. Whether it will have the same sort of alchemic transformative powers on us this year, I don't know, but I do think that this squad may need, want and deserve a kind of a bit of respite and change of environment. So as much as I hope the owners put their hands in their pockets for a signing, they can pay out for the 5-star hotel while they're at it.
They can do that. And somebody call up the sprinkly salt meat wanker to give Mikel Arteta some of his magic meat, his special meat. That sounds terrible.
And I am reluctantly prepared to go and report from the warm weather training camp.
Okay, there's a note to the Athletic editors.
If they're listening,
James,
that's a bullet I'm prepared to take, guys.
You are selfless.
What can I say?
Determination to help Arsenal. Okay, I think we had better leave it there and get on with our day, and maybe wander off and watch Everton beat Spurs, which could be quite funny. So thank you to you guys for being here, for listening. Sorry we couldn't get through more of your questions, but I think we've touched all the big subjects in this particular episode. We will have an episode of the 30 for you on Tuesday. I'm back to Dublin on Monday, but there is a big game on Monday night, Chelsea and Wolves playing, so we'll save our Premier League roundup for Patreon for Tuesday, so you can join us for that. In the meantime, take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.